The southern United States is home to an abundance of mystery. Do strange creatures and entities that have yet to be identified by science lurk throughout this region? Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome to Fire of Learning. This is the Campfire series. Join us as we explore several of the most bone-chilling examples of things said to go bump in the southern night, from cryptids to the undead to supernatural creatures and more. Louisiana. Though the land comprising the modern state has been American for roughly 200 years, the first Europeans to settle the area were the French in the 17th and 18th centuries. The traces of what they brought to this land can still be found to this day, such as their language, culture, and, some would say, a very dark curse, the manifestation of which one might have the misfortune of encountering under the Louisiana moonlight. The French called it the loup-garou. Their Cajun descendants call it rougarou. In essence, the word means werewolf. Throughout much of history, people, not merely in France but across many societies, believed that for various reasons, an individual could be afflicted with a curse that transformed them into a vicious, monstrous, evil creature. Half man, half wolf, a werewolf. Beliefs in such things were held very seriously. Many individuals were accused, tried, and even executed on the grounds of lycanthropy or having fallen under the werewolf curse. The rougarou is the Cajun variant of the broader European werewolf mythology. By day, those afflicted with the curse will appear their normal selves, although it will often seem that something is wrong with them. They may appear ill or disturbed. The transformation occurs at night. Some say that it is only the light of a full moon which triggers the transformation, others that it occurs each night. The victim takes the form of a creature with the head of a wolf but a humanoid body, and may alternate between moving on 2 or 4 legs. They are powerful, fast, and merciless. They are said to dwell in southern Louisiana in particular, among the forests, fields, and bayous at night. While the host may retain some awareness in this state, they are no longer in control of themselves, and cannot be stopped from hunting and killing. The rougarou hunts throughout the night. No living being is safe from its violent wrath, with many livestock deaths historically being blamed on the rougarou. However, its favorite prey is human beings. Anyone wandering outside the safety of their homes, especially in the wilderness at night, puts themselves at risk of becoming the beast's next victim. Stories of how the rougarou behaves vary across Louisiana. According to Cajun folklorist Barry-Jean Ancelet, speaking to Nicholls State University, legend holds that the curse lasts for 101 nights. When the creature draws human blood upon the 101st night, its curse is lifted, but passed on to its victim in an endless cycle. This was not necessarily done through biting. It seems merely drawing blood is sufficient. This is not the only explanation given for how the curse develops, however, and there may indeed be more than one way. Other tales hold that turning away from Christianity, more specifically in this instance Catholicism, invites the curse. For example, many Cajuns held that if one neglected the rules of Lent for 7 years in a row, their soul was left open to the influence of Satan, and they could become a rougarou. Once one was a rougarou, while none around them could be considered safe, they would show bias towards hunting those leading a sinful existence. Others held that the curse could be placed upon someone by a witch. In Ancelet's book, Cajun and Creole Folktales, a ritual is described in which drinking the blood of a black chicken at midnight at a crossroads invites the curse onto oneself. Defeating a rougarou is a difficult but not impossible task. Some legends hold that rougarous suffer from a compulsion to count various random objects they encounter. This is a feature shared by other creatures of European folklore, such as the vampires of Slavic mythology. However, unlike vampires, which count indefinitely, the rougarou is unable to count past the number 12. Thus, if one places 13 of the same objects on the ground in front of their home, the beast will become stuck in a futile attempt to count all of them, occupying it until sunrise, at which point it must flee and resume its human form. It is also sometimes said that a rougarou can be forced back into its human form by causing it to bleed. Defeating a Rougarou may not be so simple, however. Should it be necessary to kill the creature, many legends claim that it must be killed by fire. Others, however, hold that to kill a Rougarou does not necessarily require any special technique. One legend states that a Cajun oysterman was able to kill the Rougarou by stabbing it with a sharpened stick. The use of silver weapons and bullets is often connected to werewolf folklore in general, but this is a modern addition to the folklore and does not appear in traditional tales of the Rougarou or werewolves in general. While this may seem like the stuff of legend, there have been, and continue to be, people who have reported encountering these monsters wandering throughout the countryside. Is the Rougarou real? Are there those in Louisiana who remain afflicted? We cannot say, but we can advise you to keep your wits about you should you find yourself in this region at night. Dickson County, a county in western Tennessee located about 40 minutes west of the city of Nashville. Though there are a few small cities and towns located in this county, much of the area is rural, with forest and wilderness here that remains little changed from centuries prior. Though beautiful, there are some who claim that these woods were, and even are, the home of one of the most vicious entities in Tennessee folklore. According to legend, at some point in the 1920s, a married couple and their 7 children moved into the area, which was then even more sparsely populated than it is today. They built and lived in a log cabin near a creek just southeast of the small town of White Bluff and took up a life of farming. There was nothing unusual about this family, at least nothing that one would have expected to have invited unnatural forces into their lives. Regardless, it wasn't long after moving into the area that it began. One night, the family heard what sounded like a woman's scream coming from the surrounding forest. Disturbing, blood-curdling shrieking that shattered the silence of the night. Alarmed, the father grabbed a lantern and began to explore the area outside his house. He found nothing. Concluding that it was simply the sound of an injured animal, the family returned to bed. But then, at the same time the following night, the screaming began again, as it did the night after that as well. Indeed, night after night, the screaming would commence around sunset, becoming louder and lasting longer each night. Finally, after a week of this, the father decided to find whatever was responsible. One evening, when the sun set and the terrible noise began again, he grabbed his lantern and rifle and headed into the woods in the direction of the screaming. It wasn't long into his search that he realized that there was something not quite right about the shrieking, and the fears in the back of his mind started surfacing. As he came closer to the screams, it would sound as if they were moving off. He would then be taken in various different directions as the screams seemed to move around him, ultimately leading him in circles. Unable to pursue the source of the noise, he decided to rest in the same spot to see if it would come to him. However, it wasn't long before he heard a number of new cries, unlike those which he had been hearing, coming from the direction of his home. Fearing for his family, he raced home and rushed into his cabin. There, he found the remains of all of his family. As he collapsed to his knees in utter anguish and despair, the screams continued outside. This is where the legend begins to differ, depending on who is telling it. Some say that nothing more came of this incident, and that the White Bluff Screamer, as it came to be known, moved on. Others, however, say that the father continued pursuing the culprit, though there is disagreement about what exactly he met with when he did so. As is discussed by the Tennessean News, this area is home to numerous legends about werewolves, which seem to go back even further than this legend. Some have associated these legends with this gruesome incident and claimed that this is the creature the man eventually found. Others have claimed the creature was something more along the lines of a mountain lion. Still others have described it as a kind of Sasquatch-like creature. Indeed, the beast is often claimed to have been large, with sharp teeth and white hair. This vague description leaves several candidates, but one is a creature known as the Alabama White Thing, a white-haired ape creature similar to the Sasquatch, said to lurk primarily in the nearby state of Alabama. Some, however, believe it was something more along the lines of an evil spirit. As one story goes, as the man pursued his family's killer in the woods, the spirit of a woman emerged before him in the moonlight fog. She floated through the air with a kind of blue flame burning the ground over which she moved. Researchers have compared this figure to a figure found in Irish mythology, known as a Ban-Shee in Irish, or Banshee in English, a fairy mound woman. As is discussed in works such as Lady Jane Wilde's book Ancient Legends, Mystic Charms, and Superstitions of Ireland, banshees were believed to be spirits of death. Banshees may visit our world in the form of an older, deathly-looking woman in a gray shroud and green dress who can be found wandering the countryside. Their most distinguishing characteristic is their terrible wailing, which is not only, as Wilde called it, the most mournful sound on earth, but is an omen that death will soon come to someone close to those who hear it. The comparison is imperfect. Banshees are traditionally regarded as harbingers of death, rather than killers themselves. Ultimately, this is all speculation. The traditional story does not leave us with clear answers about what the White Bluff Screamer was, only that its terrible screams can still be heard on some nights in these woods, and that it seems they are an omen preceding profound horror. Although, admittedly, there is no evidence that these deaths truly took place, nor even specific names associated with the victims. According to local historian Tony England, the cabin in which this is alleged to have happened still stands, although it is broken down. However, we were not able to confirm this. The ambiguity leads many to conclude that the story of the White Bluff Screamer, whatever it was, is merely that, a story. And yet, there are those in the area still today who have claimed to have seen unusual things in the forest and heard the horrible cries themselves. The Battle of Chickamauga, fought from September 18th to 20th, 1863, in northwestern Georgia, was among the most significant battles of the American Civil War. 4,000 men died here in the battle itself. Many thousands more were wounded, captured, or missing, many of whom would die soon after. While a century and a half has passed since the conclusion of the battle and the war, a feeling of sorrow and pain still lingers over this battlefield. Some say it was these very feelings that attracted it to the area. Others say that it is the spirit of one of those who fell in the battle. Still others say it was here long before the battle. Regardless, many say that there is something unnatural in the wilderness surrounding the Chickamauga battlefield, around an area known as Snodgrass Hill in particular. Something which has come to be known as Old Green Eyes, the Chickamauga Green Eyes, or the Green Ghoul. As its name suggests, this entity's most distinctive feature are its eyes. Indeed, a pair of large, glowing green eyes lurking to the quiet, dark wilderness might be all that a witness observes, with some even saying that that's all there is to the entity. Others, however, have had the misfortune of seeing more. Descriptions vary considerably. Some describe the creature as a kind of tiger, believing that a statue of a tiger, dedicated to a Union regiment, on the battlefield specifically, comes to life at night. Some say the entity takes the form of a Civil War soldier, often one who has lost his head in battle and was buried without it, whose spirit now rises each night to search for it, with the green eyes floating above its headless body. One woman claimed that the green eyes belong to a ghostly horse, whose rider is a skeleton in a Confederate uniform, searching the area for a woman named Amy. The most striking and common description, however, is that of a kind of humanoid creature with pale white skin, long black hair, and a large, deformed jaw, which holds 2 long fangs. It is difficult to identify the first record mentioning this creature in any of these forms. Local historians have found records of ghost sightings in the area that date to not long after the battle, but when Old Green Eyes specifically was distinguished from the other reported supernatural activity in the area is hard to determine. According to Jim Ogden, chief historian for the Chickamauga and Chattanooga Military Park, speaking to The Pulse, the legends of Old Green Eyes go back to at least the 1960s. Some have suggested it was much earlier, others later. Regardless of when it started, it seems it was an encounter in 1976, reported in 1981 by a former park employee named Edward Tinney, that made the legend famous beyond the community. Tinney claimed that one night, while walking alone through the park woods around 4 a.m, he suddenly felt a cold chill come over his body. Then, something emerged from behind the trees. A tall man in a black coat, with long black hair and large, glaring, orange-green eyes. Tinney retreated and ran across the nearby street. As he did so, a car came down the street. When its headlights hit the entity, it disappeared. Many witnesses tell similar stories. Old Green Eyes appears to motorists and travelers briefly at night, then quickly disappears. Such people might be able to consider themselves lucky. Other incidents are much more personal. One incident, presented by author Christopher Coleman on Dixie Spirits blog, allegedly occurred in the 1950s. He claims a man in the area told him of an encounter he had in his youth. The man and a girlfriend were sitting in the park one night in his convertible car with the hood down. Suddenly, he felt what he described as a warm, moist breath coming from behind him. The couple turned around to find the ghoul with its prominent green eyes on the back of his car, staring at him. The man drove off, and the creature did not pursue. Here, the black coat is not reported, and the creature, while humanoid, is suggested to be more monstrous. Another story, attributed to local John Gentile, was told on the moonlitroad.com. In summary, he claimed that while driving alone one night many years before in his youth, a pair of green lights suddenly appeared ahead of him on the road, causing him to swerve his vehicle and crash into a tree. The humanoid creature then approached the wreck, moaned in a way that he described as the saddest sound he had ever heard, then climbed onto the hood of his car and stared into his eyes. He was hypnotized by the green eyes, and the world around him began to change. Suddenly, he found himself on the remains of a battlefield, the Chickamauga battlefield, surrounded by fire, smoke, the corpses of soldiers, and devastation. The illusion was broken moments later by the sound of an approaching park ranger's car horn, and the creature ran off into the night. What is Old Green Eyes? While the descriptions and behavior of the ghoul vary considerably, it is generally implied that the entity is somehow deeply connected to the battle. Stories differ on why exactly it remains on this earth, however. Is it the spirit of a fallen soldier, doomed to wander the earth indefinitely? An entity drawn to the area by the chaos and pain of the battle? Does it mean to do harm, or to serve as a reminder of the evil that war can bring to the world? Not everyone agrees that it does relate to the battle, however. Mark Foltz, author of the book Chattanooga Chills, believes the creature to be a very ancient spirit connected to a native society of the area, specifically the Mississippian culture. He has put forward the possibility that the entity serves as a kind of guardian of a space possibly once considered sacred in the beliefs of the indigenous people who summoned it. Chief historian Jim Ogden, who at last report had worked at the park for over 30 years, often at night, has never seen the ghoul. He believes it was the invention of a former park employee who worked there in the time the stories began to become popular, possibly referring to Tinney. Regarding any potential real sightings, numerous practical explanations are available. Indeed, it's likely not coincidence that many sightings occur at night while driving, when car headlights would be reflected in the eyes of nearby animals like deer and raccoons, which could appear yellow-green. Is Old Green Eyes merely the product of the kinds of stories humanity inevitably invents in the aftermath of tragedy and destruction? Or is there something unnatural lurking in this area after all? Either way, should you set off to find out for yourself, be sure to respect the park and its rules, including its hours, as it generally seems to be closed to the public at night. The creature known as the Sasquatch, or Bigfoot, perhaps the most famous cryptid in the world, is most associated with the forests of the Pacific Northwest, places such as Washington State and Oregon specifically. However, huge ape-like creatures said to walk upright, which are still as of yet unidentified by science, are alleged to roam throughout many areas of the country and the world. A very prominent example of this is said to lurk throughout the state of Florida. Indeed, Florida is perhaps the greatest hotspot for sightings of a Sasquatch-like creature in the country outside of the Pacific Northwest. There is a tale here of a beast called, among many names, the skunk ape. The skunk ape is similar to the Sasquatch in that it is described as a large, hairy, humanoid ape. However, it is typically described as slightly smaller, standing at perhaps 7 feet on average and weighing about 500 pounds. Its hair is typically said to be long and black, red, brown, or a mix of these, with some saying it resembles a fur coat. Similar to its Sasquatch cousins, the creature is associated with an atrocious smell, although this may be more pronounced in the skunk ape, hence the name. Witnesses compare the smell to things like swamp gas, skunks, wet dog, rotting eggs, and animal corpses. The creature moves somewhat like a human, though it is said to do so awkwardly, with some witnesses describing it as wobbling. Its arms are long, its head is round, and its eyes reflect light. It may sometimes be heard rather than seen, making a variety of growling and whooping noises. It is also alleged to be omnivorous. The creature is said to roam the forests and swamps throughout the state of Florida and even sometimes in neighboring states like Alabama and Georgia. However, it is most commonly reported in the south of the Florida Peninsula, in a roughly 8,000 square mile area called the Everglades, much of which is wilderness, including swampland and forest. Skunk apes typically avoid interaction with humans, but are sometimes attracted to areas of human activity while searching for food. It is difficult to say how far back reports of the skunk ape go. Some say that the indigenous Americans of Florida told stories of a creature which the Seminole called Esti Japjaki, meaning the hairy giant, whom they considered to be a kind of guardian of the forests. However, there does not seem to be proof that this creature existed in the original belief of the Seminole, nor any other older indigenous group in the area. The first specific story allegedly dates to 1818. Several sources state that it was in that year that a man-sized baboon was witnessed stealing from food stores and following fishermen in Apalachicola, a settlement in the Florida Panhandle. According to Michael Newton in his book Florida's Unexpected Wildlife, the creature was followed all the way to a nest it had made among cotton bales north of town. This was just as American settlers were moving into the sparsely populated territory that Spain was about to sell them. There are many more stories such as this set in the following century and a half, such as an encounter in 1929 in which an ape creature was seen shaking a bat tower in the Sugarloaf Key area, and one in 1942, when a giant ape reportedly emerged from the forest and jumped onto a man's moving vehicle, clinging to it and beating on it for half a mile. However, it must be said that while there are numerous encounters alleged to have taken place before the 1970s, all of them seem to have been first written down during or after the 70s. References to news articles, journal entries, and other written records discussing the beast before 1970 typically lead nowhere. The few documents that do exist are of questionable authenticity. This does not mean that these events did not happen, but we can't be sure that they did either. Researchers like Brian Dunning of Skeptoid.com have found the same thing. As he states in his article, Hunting the Florida Skunk Ape, the earliest verifiable written document discussing the creature dates to 1971. The event he references took place in February of that year, when a team of amateur archaeologists, led by Henry Clay Buzz Osborne, was searching for artifacts in the south of Florida when they encountered something they did not expect. One night, around 3 a.m, they claimed to have witnessed what they believed to have been a kind of ape man moving around their camp in the middle of the night, which ran off soon after it and the men spotted each other. The following morning, the men explored the area and found what they believed were the footprints of 3 individual creatures, which measured 17.5 inches long and 11.5 inches wide. The team reportedly made plaster casts of the footprints. Their story was told in an article published on August 9th of that year by the Miami News titled, "Big Cypress Ape Man to be Object of Hunt." Osmond mentioned in the article that stories of the skunk ape were told by hunters and trappers in the area long before their encounter, as far back as the 1920s. Even if this is true, it seems it was still this story that popularized the creature and the legend surrounding it. The article opens, quote, "Tibet has its abominable snowman, Oregon has its Bigfoot, now Florida has its skunk ape," end quote. Such an opening suggests the creature was being introduced to the public here, and that it was not well known beforehand. Following the publication of the article, the skunk ape became a hot topic in the area. Numerous individuals reported sightings, with their purported encounters often making their way into newspapers. Some witnesses believed the skunk ape to be a peaceful and reclusive animal. Others alleged that it chased after them or was responsible for killing their livestock. In 1977, after efforts were made to hunt and kill the beast, Florida legislator Paul Nuckols proposed a $1,000 fine and 1-year jail sentence for anyone convicted of harming or capturing an anthropoid or humanoid animal, though the bill twice failed to pass. Eventually, photographs and video footage of the creature began to emerge. Most famous of all are these photographs, purportedly showing an ape near the Myakka River State Park. The photographs were taken by an anonymous individual claiming to be an old woman who took them in the year 2000 and sent them to the Sarasota County Sheriff's Department soon after in 2001. In a letter, she explained that the animal had been taking apples from the trees in her backyard for 3 nights. On the 3rd, it climbed onto her back deck, at which point she took the photographs. She and her husband believed the animal to have been an orangutan. They described it as foul-smelling, around 6 to 7 feet tall, and claimed it was making whooping noises. Not long before, on July 8, 2000, video footage was captured in the Okeechobee Big Cypress National Preserve, allegedly showing a skunk ape. The footage was taken by local resident Dave Sheely. According to CBS News, Sheely claims that he was photographing deer in the local wilderness for his hunting friends when he heard something moving in the water. He looked and saw this, an upright ape running through the water at what he estimated to have been around 22 miles per hour, faster than the vast majority of humans are able to run. He quickly began filming. Dave Sheely is an expert on the skunk ape who has devoted much of his life to studying it. He claims he first saw a skunk ape at the age of 10 in 1977, and has claimed to have seen it 3 other times since, including this incident. The footage is of very low quality and was taken from a distance. It shows a figure walking through a mix of trees and grass ahead of Sheely, then turning and running alongside his left. To many, the footage appears to show a man in a gorilla costume walking in a path that would be convenient for a cameraman to capture. However, believers point out that it would be difficult for a man to traverse this terrain as quickly as the subject in the video did. Sheely is not only confident of the animal's existence, but his research has led him to conclude specific facts about the skunk ape. As is discussed by Smithsonian Magazine's 2014 article On the Trail of Florida's Bigfoot, the skunk ape, he states that they spend about half their lives in trees and have a particular love for lima beans, which he has used to attract them. He has elsewhere claimed that the females are smaller than the males, and believes that there are around 7 to 9 individual skunk apes in the Everglades as of 2019. Perhaps most extraordinary of all, Sheely has stated that he believes the government is attempting to cover up the beast's existence. On one occasion, he claimed he was able to retrieve a hair sample he believed to have come from a skunk ape. However, he claimed that unidentified federal agents came to his door and confiscated it soon after. What can be said of all this? It is not entirely impossible that a species of primate, even a large one, and even one that lives in such a well-studied area as the Everglades, exists, especially if it were very low in number and very, very elusive. However, zoologists argue that the odds are not very far from impossible. The fundamental problem that this cryptid faces, which many of the skunk ape's relatives like the Sasquatch also face, is that as the years have passed, as science and technology have progressed, and as more and more people have begun to carry around high-quality phone cameras in their pockets, one would expect that there really should have been clear evidence for something like this by now. People have been living in and exploring Florida for millennia and writing down their observations for centuries. The Everglades is a huge area that can be difficult to traverse, but it has, regardless, been well studied. And yet, we cannot prove that there was any mention of the animal before the 1970s. Knowledge and reports of the beast may predate this, but the question is, how do we prove this? Some argue that the skunk ape became popular in the 70s because this was when habitat destruction finally deprived the species of sufficient area to remain hidden. However, it's also worth taking into consideration that people first started seeing the skunk ape only 4 years after the Patterson-Gimlin film that helped make Bigfoot world famous was taken. Regarding indigenous tales of the beast, Brian Dunning reportedly asked a group of speakers of the Seminole language about the term Esti-Chapchaki, and they did not recognize it. As for allegations of a government cover-up, the question is, why? It's difficult to conceive of a realistic motive. But then, what are hundreds of people seeing if not a skunk ape? While much of the evidence consists of things like photographs or video footage that is not of sufficient quality to be useful, some of it, like the Myuu ape photographs, are, admittedly, difficult to explain. The subject of these photographs, for example, does not precisely resemble any known primate in existence, let alone anything native to Florida, and while it has been accused, it has not been shown to have been a forgery or a hoax. Still, the authors of the photographs, and even several prominent cryptozoologists, including Lauren Coleman, are of the belief that these pictures are of an orangutan. The idea of an orangutan living wild in Florida might seem outrageous in itself, but it might not be. As is discussed in the Smithsonian article, while there are no known primates native to Florida, they have been kept as pets and in research facilities in the area for many years. Some of these primates have not only been documented to have escaped into the wild, but have even remained there. According to the University of Florida, there are 5 known species of non-native primates living wild in the state, 3 of which are breeding, though all of them are smaller in size, such as rhesus macaques. It may be unlikely for smaller monkeys to be confused for a 7-foot skunk ape, but they could generate noise that would lend credence to the skunk ape legend. However, there could also very well be something like escaped orangutans surviving in the wilderness of Florida, as the authors of the Myuu photographs may have discovered. In the 2013 article, Tracking Florida's Skunk Ape, Joe Nickel of the Skeptical Inquirer put forward the explanation that American black bears could account for many of the sightings. Black bears live in the forests and swamps of Florida, have long black fur, stand at about 6 feet when upright, weigh about 350 pounds, avoid humans but will investigate areas of human habitation in search of food, and can, at times, smell unpleasant. He adds the tracks of black bears can seem like those of a giant primate, especially in the late summer, when the claws are more likely to be worn down. As with the Sasquatch, claims of the existence of the skunk ape have many problems. Scientists conclude, too many. And yet, after all this, witnesses remain adamant that they know what they saw. Given that their sightings continue to be reported to this day, whatever skunk apes really are, it appears they're still out there. There is an area in the desert of western Texas, just east of the small town of Marfa, which hosts a mystery that has amazed, baffled, and frightened witness after witness for decades, maybe longer. Sightings still continue to this very day, though what exactly they are remains a subject of debate. And what exactly they are doing, if there is indeed a consciousness behind them, is an even greater mystery. They are called the Marfa Lights, or the Marfa Mystery Lights. The Marfa Lights are described as basketball-sized orbs of light, which are occasionally observed suddenly manifesting above the landscape of a region of desert known as Mitchell Flat, usually at night, sometimes at dawn or dusk. According to witnesses like retired aerospace engineer and author of the book Hunting the Marfa Lights, James Bunnell, the lights vary in color, yellow, white, and orange being the most frequently reported, but with green, blue, and red orbs having been witnessed as well. They may also change color or appear in a curtain-like rainbow of colors. The lights also vary in brightness. They may be dim, stunningly bright, or even pulsate between the two. The lights may appear, disappear, and then reappear throughout the night. Sometimes they are stationary, hovering in the same area for some time. At other times, they move at great speeds across the desert and into the air, reaching heights of 400 feet, some even higher. They have been seen splitting into two and merging into each other. Sometimes one turns off and another elsewhere immediately turns on. Very rarely are up-close sightings reported. Observations are usually from a distance, leading some to conclude that the lights intentionally avoid people. A skeptic would perhaps turn to doubt as soon as they hear the phrase, strange lights. Lights in our world of technology that produces all kinds of artificial lighting everywhere we look would have to be remarkably strange indeed to truly defy explanation, even in a rural area like the desert outside Marfa. Surely there is a simple anthropogenic explanation. Perhaps, although, according to some, it's possible that the phenomenon was observed before the development of modern technology. There are no written records discussing the lights until 1957, when an article written by Paul Moran was published in Coronet magazine titled The Mystery Ghost Lights of Texas. Thus, our understanding of anything before this date is hazy at best. However, elderly locals have given oral accounts of observations made by them and their older relatives that suggest that the phenomenon may indeed predate the 50s. How far back exactly is, again, difficult to say. However, according to the Texas State Historical Association, the first known story of what are believed to have been the Marfa Lights dates to 1883. It is said that one night in that year, a young cowboy named Robert Reed Ellison, who was passing through the area on a cattle drive, claimed to have seen an unusual light in the distance during the night. He assumed the light to have been from a campfire lit by the native Apache. However, when he spoke to locals about it, he was informed that the lights were a regular occurrence that they could not explain. Efforts to investigate the area in which the lights were sighted never resulted in finding a fire nor the remains of anything incendiary at all. Awareness of the phenomenon may very well be even older. There were claims that the Native Americans of the area knew of the lights before a European arrival and had considered them to be fallen stars, though likewise we were unable to verify this. Some claim that during the Second World War, the United States Air Force even flew over the area in an attempt to determine the origins of the lights, ultimately failing to do so. Again, however, caution should be taken with claims of sightings that long predate written records. There do not appear to be many claims of harm caused by the lights. Again, on the contrary, they are rarely even observed up close. Granted, part of this may be because the land on which they are active is private and the owners seldom permit investigation. Regardless, observation is usually from a distance. In the few instances that they have been observed up close, their behavior may be frightening, but not obviously harmful. Some have reported seeing the orbs chase their cars, matching their speed no matter how fast they went. Others claim to have seen the lights enter their vehicles, flash in a brilliant light, then leave. Encounters are not always frightening, though. Some have attributed a benevolent nature to the lights. One woman, according to the TSHA, recounted a story in which her father was caught in a blizzard while walking through the area, but was led to shelter by the lights, who appeared to him in the storm. The abundant photographic and video evidence that supports the great number of reported observations makes it clear that people really are seeing something in the desert. The Marfa Lights are real. But what are they? Over the years, numerous explanations of both a practical and paranormal nature have been proposed. Regarding the paranormal explanations, some believe the lights to be the spirits of the dead, wandering throughout the desert at night. Some specify that they are the ghosts of the early Spaniards who came to the region in search of gold many centuries ago. Others have claimed that they are the spirits of Apache warriors, led by their chief Alzate, who were killed by Mexican soldiers only a year before Reed's sighting, though this event took place 60 miles away from Mitchell Flat. Others say that the lights mark the location of buried treasure. Some suggest something along the lines of an extraterrestrial origin. The lights are eerily reminiscent of the type of glowing orbs reported in many UFO and extraterrestrial encounters, such as the enduring Skinwalker Ranch case of northeastern Utah, a case to which we have dedicated an entire video. In the 1990s, the former owner of Skinwalker Ranch, Terry Sherman, reported seeing multicolored orbs very similar to the Marfa lights, among other unusual phenomena, on a regular basis. Although, these lights were not so reclusive. Indeed, he claimed they wreaked quite a bit of havoc on his property. Regarding the practical explanations, one is that the lights are caused by gases from subsurface oil escaping to the surface, similar to the swamp gases believed to have been the inspiration for tales of Will-o'-the-Wisp and Jack of the Lantern in European folklore. In 2003, James Bunnell, the aforementioned leading expert on the Marfa lights, began to devote a great deal of time and resources to studying them, setting up a monitoring system with 9 video cameras that recorded the area throughout the night. Having seen them numerous times, Bunnell does not believe the lights to be paranormal in origin. Rather, he theorized that they are a product of geologic activity, creating what he called an electromagnetic light show. Perhaps the best explanation, however, originated with Brian Dunning of Skeptoid.com. He put forward the explanation that the lights were the product of a special kind of illusion called a superior mirage. A superior mirage occurs when sufficient temperature differences between different regions of air above and below one's line of sight cause light to bend as it passes through these regions, which can make an object seem higher than it really is. The lights responsible, he believes, are car headlights from nearby highways 67 and 80. Dunning cited a 2004 study conducted by students of the Society of Physics at the University of Texas at Dallas, which, after observing the area for 5 nights in a row, concluded that all lights that appeared in that time were car headlights from nearby Highway 67. This would explain why there have never been any proven observations of the lights up close, in spite of several efforts to do so. Such an illusion would not be observable up close. However, it was Bunnell's contention that, while most witnesses are mistaking headlights on nearby Highway 67 for the ghost lights, the true phenomenon itself is very different, though they appear rarely. He estimates only 10 to 15 times a year. There may be certain problems with the mirage explanation as well, such as the speed and erratic nature of the lights. While the land on which the lights appear is mostly private, there are viewing areas outside it that are not, namely the Marfa Mystery Lights Viewing Center, established by the state in 2003 for the curious to try to spot them. As to what they are, argument could be made that the mystery is not yet completely solved. I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, we invite you to come check out the rest of Fire of Learning, especially our other Campfire series videos, and to subscribe to see more videos like this in the future. To support the channel further, there is a link to our Patreon in the description. A special thanks to our current supporters listed here. We also run a science channel much like this called Lucinox, where we have just uploaded a new video discussing the lives of blue jays, so be sure to check that out too. Thank you for watching, and be sure to join us next time around the campfire.